The man did not scream when it happened. He couldn't. The cold had already taken that from him. Somewhere in the forests of Eastern Europe, his boots frozen solid, his breath shallow and painful, he made a decision that would keep him alive another night but would haunt military medicine for decades. What soldiers did to survive in World War II was not always heroic. Sometimes it was simply desperate. And after the war ended, many of these methods were quietly erased, restricted, or outright banned, not because they didn't work, but because of what they cost the human body and the human mind. World War II forced millions of ordinary people into environments the human body was never meant to endure. Arctic winters, tropical jungles, besieged cities, prison camps, and battlefields where supply lines collapsed without warning. Soldiers and civilians alike faced hunger, exposure, disease, and isolation on a scale rarely seen before or since. Official training manuals offered guidance, but reality quickly outpaced doctrine. When survival was reduced to hours or days, people improvised. Some of those improvisations saved lives. Others crossed ethical and medical lines that governments later decided should never be crossed again. The first of these banned survival practices emerged from extreme cold, where frostbite and hypothermia were often deadlier than enemy fire. In desperate conditions, soldiers learned that applying urine to frozen hands or feet could temporarily restore sensation and delay tissue death. The warmth was immediate, and in some cases, circulation returned just long enough to prevent the complete loss of fingers or toes. At the time, medics tolerated it because there were no alternatives. After the war, medical research showed that this practice caused long-term nerve damage, increased infection risk, and worsened tissue breakdown once refreezing occurred. Modern military manuals explicitly forbid it. Today, the lesson is not to replicate the act, but to understand why controlled rewarming, insulation, and moisture management are essential. In modern survival situations, this knowledge translates into media group, survivalist checking socks and boots for dryness, hands carefully drying off wet extremities, outdoor expert demonstrating gradual warm-up of cold hands, stock would distribute equally, keeping extremities dry, avoiding rapid temperature swings, and using body-to-body heat transfer instead of improvised warmth. Another survival method later condemned involved deliberate dehydration as a rationing strategy. In prisoner of war camps and during long retreats, some soldiers intentionally restricted water intake to stretch limited supplies, believing the body could adapt. Short-term survival was sometimes achieved, but post-war studies revealed catastrophic kidney damage, cardiovascular strain, and increased mortality weeks later. Militaries now train soldiers to prioritize hydration above nearly all other needs. The practical takeaway today is clear ration food before water, manage exertion levels, and seek water sources early. Survival is not about enduring thirst, but about preventing irreversible damage that appears after rescue. One of the most disturbing practices to emerge involved self-inflicted minor injuries to avoid exposure or forced labor. In extreme cases, soldiers fractured fingers or toes deliberately to be removed from frontline positions or labor details that would almost certainly kill them. While this saved lives in the short term, it was later classified as self-harm under military law and prohibited entirely. Post-war doctrine emphasized mental resilience and escape and evasion strategies instead. For modern survivalists, the lesson is psychological rather than physical. Survival decisions made under terror can permanently alter judgment. Training today focuses on stress inoculation and decision-making under pressure to prevent irreversible choices driven by panic. In besieged cities and encircled units, another banned tactic emerged: the consumption of chemically treated materials for calories. Soldiers boiled leather gear, belts, and treated fabrics to extract gelatin and fats. While this provided minimal energy, the chemical residues caused liver toxicity and digestive failure weeks later. After the war, military survival manuals strictly banned consumption of treated materials. The modern application is knowing the difference between edible animal products and industrially processed materials. Today's survival training emphasizes identifying safe, natural food sources rather than extracting calories from toxic substitutes. Perhaps the most ethically complex survival practice involved battlefield triage decisions that prioritized the survival of the group over the individual. In isolated units, soldiers sometimes withheld care from mortally wounded comrades to preserve medical supplies and mobility. While not illegal during the war, this practice was later formally restricted under updated Geneva Convention interpretations. Modern militaries now require care proportional to capability and mandate evacuation when possible. For civilian survival planning, this reinforces the importance of preparation and redundancy, so that survival never depends on abandoning others. Disease, presented another brutal survival challenge, particularly in tropical theaters. Soldiers sometimes intentionally expose themselves to mild strains of illness to build resistance before entering high-risk zones. This crude form of inoculation occasionally worked, but often resulted in uncontrolled outbreaks. After the war, this practice was explicitly banned and replaced by regulated vaccination programs. The modern lesson is straightforward. Controlled prevention saves lives, while uncontrolled exposure multiplies risk. Preparation replaces improvisation when science is available. The final banned survival method was extreme sleep deprivation used to maintain vigilance during encirclement. Soldiers remained awake for days, believing sleep meant death. While this prevented surprise attacks, it caused hallucinations, cognitive collapse, and fatal errors. Post-war studies proved that sleep deprivation degrades survival odds beyond a critical threshold. Modern doctrine enforces sleep discipline even in combat. Today, this knowledge applies directly to crisis situations. Controlled rest preserves decision-making, coordination, and long-term survival. What ties all these practices together is not cruelty, but necessity. These were not tactics chosen lightly. They were born in moments where the margin between life and death was measured in minutes. After the war, governments and militaries looked back and recognized that survival at any cost was not always survival worth preserving. Bans were not judgments on the people who used these methods, but acknowledgments of their long-term harm. For historians and survivalists today, these stories are not warnings against learning from the past. They are reminders to learn correctly. Survival is not about enduring the unendurable, but about understanding limits of the body, the mind, and ethics. The men and women who lived through World War II paid for this knowledge with their health and often their lives. We study it so that we do not have to repeat it. If you value serious, historically grounded survival history without sensationalism, this is what Survival Archives exists for. Subscribe to the channel, share this documentary with others who care about real history, and keep these lessons alive, not as tricks to repeat, but as truths earned under the harshest conditions imaginable.